Let's go. Let's go. Part 76, the state of football here, your new home. Weekdays, 9 a.m. Eastern for real football talk. Ric Serritella here at the Jersey Shore, bringing it to you unfiltered on another edition. Back at it again, of course, along with John Murphy, the Toronto Argonauts VP of Player Personnel, back in New Orleans, bracing for another storm, fresh off our San Diego trip at the Hub Football, and halfway across the country in the center of the universe is Russ Lande, Chicago's, all via New York, New Jersey, tri-state area. Of course, Russ Lande with the Calgary Stampeders, doing the U.S. scouting there, sports management, worldwide football, GM and scouting course. Make sure you check that out. Of course, infectious scouting. And today, I mean, hey, who loves talking football more than me with these two guys, Ric Serritella, John Murphy, Russell Lande, each and every Tuesday. You know, if you tune in on Mondays, you know, it's our NFL recap with Ralph Ventry. If you tune in Tuesdays, well, you know, we're going to recap the weekend that was. We're going to look ahead at the weekend that is. We're going to talk today. We've got Senior Bowl is rolling out the invites and now starting to get to the players that we are used to seeing the Senior Bowl invites. So we'll take a deep dive into that. Jim Nagy there wearing his now and later Gators for sure this morning, if you've been paying attention there. We'll also talk about the latest All-Star game buzz. We'll get in a little of the standouts from the Hub football event that we were out in San Diego. And oh, by the way, Scouting the Nation, we posted it yesterday on NFLDraftBible.com. All of our risers, sliders, and surprises. We'll get into some of those today. Also have some guys within touch base on. Make sure you use the promo code Familia50. Get 50% off the 2021 NFL Draft Bible, available now. Gentlemen, good morning. I love chopping it up and talking some football, NFL Draft Edition. And, you know, each and every week we kind of recap some of the players that were and, you know, take a look at some of the players that will be. So let's start it off. Russ, you're the guest for today. So some players that kind of stood out to you this past weekend. What caught your eye?
You know, one of the guys, and it's not just me, it seems like everybody was sort of grabbed the attention when that Indiana-Michigan State game, that receiver Ty Freifogel, I don't know if I'm saying the name right, but you, along with a number of people, have already written about him. But I mean, this is a kid that I think coming into the year, not a lot of people were really talking about as a guy. I think the last month, well, not last month, but since Big Ten got started, he's really shown that for a guy that was sort of unknown, he's a good little football player. And I shouldn't say little, he's over 6 feet, but he's a good player. Really impressed me. Thought he did a good job catching the ball. Thought he showed a lot of the skills to force teams to really put him on the back end of their draft board. I'm not saying this kid's going to be flying up draft board. It's going to be a first-round pick like Burrow, who was an unknown last year. But this kid, to me, did a good job in that Michigan State game. Really impressed with him.
Yeah, and, you know, it was Whop Philyor that came into the season with all the hype, right? And now Freifogel, they got some funny names out there.
Yeah, you are kidding, right?
But hey, it's Freifogel stealing all the attention, kind of emerging as the playmaker. And we said it in the Scouting the Nation article, John. I mean, this upcoming weekend could be, quite honestly, the biggest win in Hoosiers football history. And then you have Freifogel going up one-on-one against Sean Wade. He could really kind of, you know, I don't want to say solidify himself as a draftable guy, but he could really kind of establish himself as a priority free agent at the very least.
Well, I think the interesting thing there is that would be a matchup that you would say should give Wade an opportunity to look more like himself. The matchup that might be a struggle for Wade would be if they put that speedy, you know, the quicker speedy kid out there, you know, against them, because that's what gave him all kinds of trouble against Penn State. I think the other thing is there a question of which logo or which helmet or which, you know, mascot head Lee Corso's putting on this weekend? If you don't put the Indiana head, you've been on the show for literally as long as it's been since they beat a ranked team. So, I mean, come on, Lee, you got to, you know, if you don't put on the Indiana head this week, it'd be like Rick being on ESPN and not picking Rutgers. Okay, yeah. That's not happening.
Yeah, ESPN might have to order the head because they've never.
I don't even know if they have. You know, like, well, they do, but it looks like Bobby Knight, right? So the last time they've talked about anything sports related in Indiana, it just shows you the COVID world we're living in. that we're spending the majority time when we talk about the Big Ten, and we're talking about Indiana, Northwestern, Purdue. That's, just kind of shows you where we're at in 2020. I think a kid that caught my eye, mainly because it's very rare that a Power 5 conference would have a senior quarterback that literally you've never heard of, right? It's very hard. It's pretty difficult for you to get to that point of your career and not be heard of. And last week, Colorado, for the second week in a row, trots out Sam Neuer, who, has a really interesting background here. He went into the transfer portal after moving to safety and playing special teams as a fourth-year player last year, graduates, but in the meantime of the transfer portal, guess what happens? Mel Tucker leaves for Michigan State. The new coaching staff calls him and says, hey, look, at least you know an offense. You got a real shot to play quarterback. If you untransfer and really just come back, play your fifth year, you have a legit shot. We'll put you in the quarterback mix. They're now 2-0. He's thrown for 500. He's run for 100. And this is a kid, when you start looking back at the pedigree, 3 to 4 star quarterback at Oregon, really nice looking athlete. Now, are we talking about a guy that's going to all of a sudden morph his way into being a draft pick? Unlikely. But all of a sudden on the radar with that type of athletic ability, the factor that the first time in over 50 years, somebody at Colorado has gotten a letter as a quarterback and now a defensive player and now back at quarterback as your fifth year. We know back in the day, we saw some guys, Jeff Hostetler, line up playing special teams, run down there, make some tackles before, Parcells trusted him to give him the ball. You got to love stories like this. Sometimes you just got to write about, guys who have a good story, even if it's not going to turn out to, be the next big thing in terms of the NFL draft. But a kid to watch, because that athletic ability is really giving Colorado an infusion of talent at a position that they thought it might be a real struggle this year. They're now 2-0. We mentioned Colorado, Washington State. Cal had a tough loss there. We know that there's a team out there, in the Pac-12 that'll be able to have that kind of resurgence the way that Indiana and North Carolina have. It might just be Colorado, and surprisingly, it might be with a fifth-year quarterback that last year was running down, covering kicks and punts.
Well, hey, who doesn't like a defensive-minded quarterback? I'm intrigued. And, remember, Steven Montez was there, a 4-year starter, so he basically, held the clipboard for Steven and tried to find a way to find the field. As I'm doing the show, I realize there's Ron Dane over my shoulder. And to me, it's the pipeline of New Jersey running backs to Wisconsin, right? And we've got the next great one, I believe, this Jalen Berger. And, shout out to Newark, New Jersey, the Familia, all the family from Newark here in the Serritella household. So, again, Don Bosco Prep, 4-star recruit, a guy that turned down offers from UCLA and Alabama. So, his first game into action there, running, all over the Wolverines, pretty impressive debut. So keep an eye on him. You talk about Anthony Davis, Corey Clement, Jonathan Taylor, the list goes on and on and on. All these New Jersey running backs, the trend stops now with Coach Shiano in Rutgers. So Berger escapes New Jersey, but we're fencing the garden here, and we'll be keeping tabs on him. A true freshman, by the way, from the powerhouse Don Bosco Prep, and that'll be an interesting one too this weekend with the Northwestern defense. Blake Gallagher and Patty Fisher making a bunch of plays there. They've also got this young sophomore defensive end. Very raw, 6'5", about 255, Lyco, something like that. And you mentioned, a P5 quarterback that's kind of somewhat under the radar. This kid in Arizona, Brunell, 6'6", 250 pounds, very efficient and limited time playing last year. I think 9-1 touchdown to interception ratio. I really haven't dug into him yet. So a guy there that, is having a productive start in his first game or two here on the Pac-12. So Pac-12 suddenly producing some under-the-radar quarterbacks. Of course, we all know how hot and cold that could be because everybody was riding that KJ Costello wave after week 1. So just a few guys there that caught our attention. You're tuned in to the State of Football here weekdays, 9 a.m. Eastern. Of course, the NFL Draft Tailgate Show Saturday, 10 a.m., all brought to you by NFLDraftBible.com. Good to see PTW Fantasy in the chat room. All my chat room people. It's for the people, baby. It's for the people. Twitter, Facebook, Periscope, all of you guys. If you have a question, drop us a line. We love to be interactive and take your questions. My question to you, Mr. John Murphy, is who are you looking ahead to this upcoming weekend? Some good games clearly on the docket. We talked about Indiana versus Ohio State. Who will you be keeping an eye on?
Well, I think, that in-state matchup, right? I was one for sure that had Oklahoma, kind of buried, and here's a shot, right? Now Texas A&M's not going to play, even though it would have been against Ole Miss at home. That should have been a big victory for A&M and probably a high-scoring affair. Oklahoma has a chance at home. You take care of your business. You're a 2-loss team. It's going to come down to the final couple of games there, to see who's going to make it and who might have a shot to at least be on the outside of that top-end group to give somebody an opportunity to decide. Would they look at a 1-loss A&M team? Will they look at a 2-loss Oklahoma team if a BYU or a Cincinnati has only 1 loss? Now, we know what the history tells you, which is if BYU or Cincinnati loses, they're done. They have no shot to bounce themselves back in. We'll see Notre Dame with the bye, then a huge matchup against North Carolina. So that's one more step that they have to take. And then we'll see the next time, with Clemson, does Trevor Lawrence play? Do they give him another week, kind of to get things settled? Because it seems like we're on a kind of a crash course with Alabama. Florida could crash the party if they beat Alabama. Texas A&M, can they just ride it all the way through and hope to get in at the last minute? Will somebody vote A&M over a 1-loss Notre Dame team or even a 1-loss A&M? Could they get to 4 if Clemson were to lose to Notre Dame twice and in a similar fashion, right? If the second game is a repeat of the first game, is there any chance we're going to get, a version 3 because it makes sense financially? I'll tell you that much. So I think it's an interesting weekend because here's Spencer Rattler, but here's Oklahoma State, where this should have been the year that you could be better than Oklahoma, right? So this is a game, even though it's in Oklahoma, you have more of the veterans. You have Spencer back. There you have Rattler going. But, hey, at home, it would seem like Oklahoma could make their season by knocking Oklahoma State completely out. And now they're going to be on the cusp of the top, 10 or 12. I think that the negative here is missing some of these games that, we would have wanted to see. So you don't get all of the good matchups, that we wanted. You mentioned the Indiana game against Ohio State for obvious historical reasons. And then I think another one that just kind of jumps out at you is UCF. That's probably the most dangerous thing left on Cincinnati's schedule. And if anything's going to give their defense
shootout,
a reason to, kind of stay up late at night, is that the one thing UCF can do for sure is spread you out and go for 500 yards. So it'll be interesting to see that attacking style that Cincinnati has used so well. Do you stay aggressive even against a team like that? Or do you kind of settle back a little, give up a little, but keep it all in front of you and not get into a shootout with a team that knows their only shot probably to win this weekend is to go shootout style, there. And then and the last one, only because of how they played out the last week, is the Tulsa-Tulane becomes a really interesting game for that conference. Tulsa's still undefeated, knocks out SMU on a nice comeback win, and Tulane, for the first time, I've been mentioning it, That program is headed in the right direction, gets a win over a top 25 team, and shuts down the Army, offense, which is a, pretty significant thing to do when you see that kind of offense only once a year and you shut it down the way you did. And don't look now, but Patrick Johnson is now leading the nation with 10 sacks and his second 10-sack season of his career. That's going to be a guy that we're going to find on a 3-4 defense team in the coming years, and he's going to play a really good game somewhere down the line on a Sunday, because not only is he a relentless pass rusher, but having watched him since being a freshman to now being a senior, not only are you getting a guy that's got about 25 career sacks, every time one of his younger teammates misses a tackle, makes a bad play, they had a kid getting burned on the regular against SMU, their coaching staff doesn't have to turn around and look at the sideline when they come off the field. This guy's got his helmet off, talking to the kids, rallying the troops, getting them back engaged. I really like what that kid could do as a mid-round draft pick, because I think someone who has such high character and he's smart and he's been super productive is going to find a way to be a productive rotational player at the next level.
Yeah, and I think I saw the Cameron Sample Senior Bowl invite. I'm not sure I saw the Patrick Johnson Senior Bowl invite, so I'm sure that
would make sense because I've written about Sample twice, so it would make sense that the Senior Bowl.
Well, hey, there you go. Well, hey, this is the state of football here. Ric Serritella, John Murphy, Russell Lande. You mentioned 25 sacks. That stands out to me because also D'Angelo Malone, the Western Kentucky pass rusher, he's now got consecutive weeks back-to-back of double-digit sack, or not double-digit, two sacks back-to-back games. He is now the Hilltoppers all-time sack record holder in the FBS modern era. So he's a guy now. I think there's legit top 100 buzz. A guy, if he tests how we think he will, could probably slide into the top 50, maybe even early day 2. That is D'Angelo Malone. No ceiling there. The one other guy I'm looking forward to the one matchup I'm looking forward to is Najee Harris versus Jamin Davis, the Kentucky linebacker there, the big junior Kentucky linebacker who's had double-digit tackles in every game for the Wildcats. He's just all over the field, head on a swivel, flying to the football. And, if you're into collisions and smashing heads, well, Najee Harris running between the tackles and Jamin Davis all day long. They're going to have about 10 of those collisions on Saturday. So that's the matchup I'm looking forward to. We go over to Russell Lande to see who he's keeping an eye on this upcoming college football weekend.
There are two games, and I'm sort of going in a different direction. I'm not really worried about playoffs or anything like that, but I got a small school and a big school. Firstly, how about Coastal Carolina, App State? And this is sort of dovetailing with the CFL because Coastal Carolina's got a first-year senior starting DB linebacker, Enoch Maconzo. If you watch the clips online, you can see this kid's really productive. I've not graded any film on him, but he's a Canadian kid from Quebec, starting there for Coastal Carolina, leading tackler. Very interesting just to watch him play against App State, which is always loaded with athletes. Even when they're not winning a lot of games, they always have a ton of athletes on the field. So great chance to peek at Enoch, see what he can do. Very interesting guy because he's 6 foot, about 5'11", 6 foot, 200. Where is he? Is he a DB or is he a linebacker? They play him more close to the line of scrimmage. He flies around the field. So it'd be my first chance to take a peek at him. And the other one, you guys know I've been raving about Kyle Pitts, best tight end I can remember grading, better than Kellen Winslow Jr. when he came out of Miami. Well, I want to see Iowa Penn State. I want to see this Pat Freiermuth kid. A bunch of scouts have been saying, hey, I know you think Pitts is the best, and he is, but this kid's a legit NFL tight end. They said, you better take a peek at him. This guy's going to be a high pick as long as he stays healthy. So I want to take a peek at him, see what he looks like. Different guy than Pitts. Pitts is that long, linear, thin guy with great receiving skills. This kid's 6'5", 260, big, thick-bodied kid, powerful is from what I've heard. Really want to take a look and get a close look at what he can do on the field. So those are the two games I'll definitely be watching this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, Freiermuth certainly lives up to the moniker Baby Gronk, right? Because he's a guy that can carry, one or two bodies into the end zone with him. And so, I do think those guys are close. Pitts has just been incredible. I mean, really incredible. And it's been a playmaking year for the tight ends. We talk about the Texas A&M kid Weidermeyer, who's just a true sophomore, so he won't be eligible this year. And then you throw guys like Brevin Jordan into the mix, and there's
a kid from Indiana with the funky last name. I can't even remember his name. He's really good. And then a kid from Ole Miss, Yobith, whatever it is.
Your boy, he's from the Temple transfer.
Yeah, he's a good player. He's stiff, but he can run and he can catch.
And there's a guy, he didn't really produce much at Temple. Now he's got a Senior Bowl invite too as well. So I guess that leads us into our next segment. Before we get there, a guy who was on the Senior Bowl radar last year and on the NFLPA Bowl radar, Jake Bentley. It's interesting because Utah, they had their first 2 games canceled due to the COVID. Bentley was named one of the team captains. However, Kyle Whittingham refuses to name a starting quarterback, saying, we'll announce our starter when we take the field on Saturday. So a little bit of a head scratcher for me because, he was elected a team captain. Obviously, the big-time pedigree coming over from South Carolina, highly recruited. 3-time captain, by the way, at South Carolina, so 4-time captain in his career. If he's your starter, why not just make that announcement? Seems a little bit weird because if he does take the field, it's not like you're fooling anybody. So something tells me like, hey, well, maybe he's not the starter. Whatever the case may be, I think, it'll be a chance to kind of jumpstart or kind of reboot his draft stock. But man, if he doesn't start, well, then I don't even know if he even gets a look or an all-star invite or a combine invite or has a pro. Jake Bentley, anybody have a thought on this kid?
No, but if you're not starting, that's a big red flag for NFL teams. Their rule of thumb generally is if you're not a starter in college, your odds of making it in the NFL, there's only 1 or 2 guys in the last 10 years that have really developed. I think the most famous guy would probably be a guy like Daniel Hunter, who was sort of a rotational guy at LSU, but everybody knew he was a freak of nature athlete and was just sort of a developmental guy. A guy that's not a regular starter in college, the history of them making it in the NFL is very low.
Yeah, then obviously coming off that Liz Frank injury, Jake Bentley, facing an uphill climb, but we haven't forgot about you, Jake. We still remember. We still remember here on the State of Football here. Weekdays, 9 a.m. Eastern. Of course, Saturday, the NFL Draft Tailgate Show. That's 10 a.m. Eastern. Tomorrow night, Brian Baldy's Breakdowns, the Edge Rusher Seminar. Samantha, see if you can get us the tweet with all the edge rushers that he's going to be highlighting this weekend. Some really exciting names. DeMarcus Ware, I believe, is one of them. If you're into the all-22 breakdowns, nobody breaks it down X's and O's like Brian Baldinger of the NFL Network. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And then, of course, Friday Night Scout School, we have some stuff going on there with David Turner and Ryan Roberts. And I think, COVID is really allowed us to dive into that seminar world. And while we're talking about scouting seminars, that is, Russell Lande does the football GM and scouting course at sportsmanagementworldwide.com. Make sure you check him out. Russ, give him a little sneak peek preview of what you do over there.
Well, we just really try to give you sort of the basics, just a little idea of what the job entails being a scout, what organizations are structured like, and give you some tidbits on how to get a chance to get a foot in the door somewhere. Anybody who tells you that you can just take a class or go to college and automatically go from that to working in the NFL has no idea what they're talking about. If you look at everybody in the NFL, everybody started off in college just about and worked their way up. It doesn't happen overnight. And I think the big thing you have to learn is, and that's what I try to teach in the class, is you have to differentiate yourself. There are so many ways to do it, and we go over that week by week. We have people that have taken my class that are assistant GMs in CFL, that are scouts in the NFL, that are working in media all across the country. So we try to teach you sort of the plain basics. We're not going to get into something where you're going to come out of this and be able to find the Tom Brady the first time you watch film, but you're going to at least have the basics for scouting and the tidbits for how to get your foot in the door in football somewhere in the country.
Yeah, and one of your students is Roy Countryman, who I think is a nice up-and-coming young mind in this business. He produced take Russell's course, and suddenly now It's a thick book. You're producing
right.
You're producing novels over here, right?
I'm
You
telling
can knock
you.
somebody out with this bad boy. Roy's a good guy, though, man. He's got a good eye for talent and somebody that came through the pipeline there at the SMWW.
Yeah, it's a long list. We've had some great people. I mean, Drew Alame took the class 12 years ago, I think, when he was with Hamilton. He was working in the equipment room, and as part of the class, you have to interview someone on the football side. He went and interviewed their GM at the time, or head of scouting, which is Craig Smith. And Craig said, why don't you start coming over and work and do some stuff in scouting during your free time? Now, fast forward a decade later, he's their co-GM. And I mean, it doesn't mean that you're going to learn everything it takes to run a franchise. It's just going to give you some little tips on how to find a way to separate yourself and get a foot in the door.
Yeah, Craig Smith, really good dude. And as John noted in the chat room, Bill O'Brien has signed up for the next wave of Russ Lande football GM and scouting. I love it here. By the way, the Baldy breakdowns, DeMarcus Ware, Von Miller, and Myles Garrett, who, you know, in some circles, maybe inside the state of Ohio, at least, Myles Garrett receiving a little bit of MVP consideration with the, you know, kind of numbers and production he's put together here. The resurgence of the Cleveland Browns suddenly in the playoff hunt.
Well, you know, it's sort of funny. When he came out, I'm sure you guys remember, everybody was comparing him to the two Boses because one had just come before him, and then you had Nick. And myself, I really thought he was sort of the number 3 guy in that threesome. And so far, it looks like he may turn out to be the best of them all. The guy stays on the field.
Yeah.
Not hurt every other week like those two guys.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been pretty dominant every game you watch this season. He is constantly getting to the quarterback. He's really impressed me so far this year. I think if he keeps playing this way and stays healthy, he could be a big part of why the Browns can challenge to make the playoffs this year.
Well, you know, for me, it's Aaron Donald 1, Myles Garrett 2.
There's no doubt about that.
But to me, right now, those are my 2 defensive MVPs. No doubt about it. The 2 best players in the league.
Well, Donald is sort of like Watt was 7 or 8 years ago, which is you don't have to even bother debating. He's the guy. Right?
Yeah.
It's like when JJ won, 3 out of 4 defensive players of the year, you didn't even bother saying who's the best defensive player.
Right.
All right, who's next?
Yeah. Donna, I mean, he's just a one-man wrecking.
He's unbelievable.
All right. The state of football here, weekdays, 9 a.m. Eastern, breaking it down for the people. NFLDraftBible.com is bringing you the names you need to know first since 2002. It's what we do. Make sure you become a disciple today. It's because of the folks like you, the listening audience that subscribes and keeps us alive for independent scouting analysis and names you need to know. I mean, hey, nobody's got a big board like we have. The rankings are up on the website now. We couldn't do it without you because of your independent support. Make sure you subscribe if you can afford to. We appreciate the contributions. It keeps us going. It keeps us alive. It keeps us here every day. So thank you so much. It's the November to remember. By the way, we're giving thanks to all you people that have supported us throughout the years. Promo code Familia50. If you're not a Paisano from Jersey, then I'll spell it for you. FAMILIA50. All right, let's get into some of these Senior Bowl invites here. I woke up this morning to a Gator posted on the Senior Bowl Twitter, and about an hour later, I go back and Kyle Trask has an invite. You get an invite. You get an invite. Trevin Grimes, you get an invite. Sean Davis gets an invite. Jeremiah Moon gets an invite. Everybody gets an invite from the Florida Gators. So, some interesting names here, John. And you wonder, too, like Florida, with all this talent, should they get into the college football playoff and everything starts clicking? I mean, it is really a upperclassman, talent-laden team that could really do some damage here. And you take a look at these Senior Bowl invites, it's a really good group.
Yeah, and I think, that's what makes it really interesting, to me is, we're all kind of wondering, as other things, are not happening, Senior Bowl keeps, kind of chugging out these, invites every week, and I kind of think my perspective with it is, there's either going to be an announcement in terms of a change of philosophy in terms of how they're going to try to handle this. And I know, it's only speaking from what we've seen. I think the game part of this is what could be in danger. And if they might try to separate, but you have to remember, when you're doing an all-star game, much like a workout, this would not be just, saying, well, you could do offensive players one week, and defensive players another week. There's groupings that would need to be together if you're saying fundamentally, we're still going to go out on the practice field and practice and do the parts that the scouts, and the NFL coaches would want to see. So you would have to have receiver DBs, quarterbacks all together. You'd have to have quarterbacks there to work with the backs. Fundamentally, you need the O-line and D-line kind of be together because you look and, you got one running back, so we're not playing today. Good thing because, we're not running the ball much in the Senior Bowl with one running back so far added, 2 or 3 quarterbacks, there's 6 safeties, there's 5 or 6 receivers, there's 3 tight ends. Are you headed in a direction where you're going to see maybe 150 guys, and a longer process and maybe no game? I think there's some elements to this where, if anybody and any city will go all in to try to figure out a way to maintain some semblance of their event, it would be, Mobile, Alabama, right? They have the support. They have good, sponsor connections. They could do some different things outside the box, and then, there's also been the speculation of, would they kind of narrow it down to, each team having 3 to 5 representatives in order to have the hotel rooms, have the structure in place, and have the safety measures in place that people are wanting to have. So to me, that's the interesting part. They're, probably a third to, maybe 30%, 40%, in terms of invites. And you already have 8 guys, that are FCS. Last year, the whole roster had 6, so they definitely have gone out of their way with that. And like we were talking about downtime over the weekend, possibility that they're foreshadowing that a lot of agents are going to say, this is not what we need to do this year. Like the thing you need to do is get healthy, finish your season, stay healthy, avoid unnecessary travel so you don't get sick, and wait for the combine or wait for the NFL to tell you what's really next. So is the Senior Bowl really not going to get a whole lot of first-round picks, maybe be more of, second to the middle of the draft? Are they kind of hitting that quotient? And the other part is, if the NFL is having any third-party conversation with a former NFL scout who has proven to be very knowledgeable in terms of who to pick for these games the last couple of years at the Senior Bowl, it could be that this is really helping the NFL by having the smaller school guys that are going to struggle to get a pro day, guys that teams have had struggle getting their eyes on. Now you can send your decision makers down to Mobile and see some of these guys that might now be able to help themselves go from maybe not being thought of as high round picks to kind of establishing their grade. Because we know the one thing that we've all heard, from when college football has started till now, there's a lot of people in the business, both on the scouting side and the agent side, that are worried, am I really going after, am I looking at guys and knowing effectively what their real grade is and where do they really stand when push comes to shove? So there could be a lot of guys that end up in the top 100 that we haven't talked about, and a lot of guys that end up in the 5th to 7th round that are getting overgraded or over, talked about right now. So maybe the Senior Bowl is a little more in tune, to kind of what their idea of what they're doing this year will be. And it'll be very interesting in the coming weeks, to see what that actually is.
Well, I think what you're hearing more of is it's aiming to be a 2-week event, which would make sense if you're going to do the proper COVID protocol of self-quarantine and 5 days, before you even get to the weigh-ins and the measurements. And to your point, John, I mean, as you guys both know, I mean, you can't have all those people in the weigh-ins. I know there is an issue because we talked about it with the NFLPA Bowl in terms of streaming the weigh-ins. That's something the NFL would frown down upon for privacy issues, and they've gotten away from that aspect of it. So, I don't think streaming it. I mean, it could be an option. I don't think it's a preferable option. But I mean, if you want to have people in there, it's going to have to be limited team personnel. And honestly, I think it's got to be really limited to one guy per team in the weigh-ins. And all you media folks, sorry, not sorry. That's just the way it's got to be. If this event is going to have any kind of success, right? Because all these other games with the bravado, College Gridiron Showcase and Tropic Bowl, and I'm hearing Hula Bowl is going to announce a wave of invites. And before we get out to Senior Bowl standouts, Russ, I'm curious to get your take here. Yeah, I know everybody wants to have an event. They want to do right by the players. They want to try to make their money. But this could also go the other way too. Like the spring league is the COVID is running rampant now. I mean, you got College Gridiron Showcase, who I think they had 400 or 500 players at last year's event. Suddenly now, if you don't have the proper testing and the protocol in place and the COVID starts running wild, this could really put a negative name attached to your event as well.
Not just a negative name, but think about potential lawsuits. I just sit here and think, and given I know zero medically, so don't as
Dr. Russ,
as Penn Teller likes to always say, don't take medical advice from a hack comedian. Don't listen to me for medical advice. But the way that the everybody on TV keeps saying that the virus is getting worse and worse, I think that the Senior Bowl is going to do everything humanly possible with the coordination with the NFL, with the medical profession to try to pull this off. I got to think it's 50-50 they're going to be able to even get something done. Because over the next month and a half, how many of these kids that think they have a chance of being a pro, whether it's going to be a first or a sixth round pick, are going to want to risk anything to be around 200 kids or 150 kids and all that stuff, having to travel, drive, whatever it may be. I hope it does, because I can tell you there's some guys I want to see. I mean, you just mentioned Kyle Trask is going to be there. This is a huge event for Kyle Trask, because the big question I'm hearing from scouts is, does he have the arm to play in the NFL? That's what they want to see. Because if he can prove he's got the arm, I think this guy's going to go flying up draft boards to challenge to be one of the first 2 or 3 guys taken in the draft, if he proves he has the arm strength. But that's one of the big debates with this guy. Also, how about Jamie Newman? You talk about a guy that has a lot to prove. I mean, a guy that if you take his 20 best plays from 2019, they're on par with anybody, Burrow or anybody else. But you take those 50 or so worst plays and they're horrible. So teams want to take a look at a kid like Newman and say, what's the real deal? He's got a big arm. He's a tremendous athlete. He flashes a quick release. He's regarded as a phenomenal leader at Wake Forest. So teams want to see that, or a guy like Nico Collins, who last year at Michigan was so dominant. So there's a lot of guys that this game has huge implications for. I just don't know if it's realistic to be able to pull it off. Look at it. Rick, you're knee deep in the NFLPA, and the East-West is a long-standing tradition, been around forever, and they both already said we can't pull this off. And that's part of the reason I think Jim is doing such a great job of getting out there and publicizing the invites, because it gives a chance to get these kids publicity, get their name out there so that the media knows about them. So if there isn't a game, at least their name is out there and they're going to get fair media attention. I just have a hard time saying that it's definitively going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think, being involved with the NFLPA Bowl, seeing what the East-West run game has done, it's unfortunate, but it's the smart thing to do. And, we're still going to have an educational type of program that's going to help benefit players in their transition to the next level and provide some elements. It's not going to be nearly as valuable as an all-star game, right? But we're going to do something for them, at least to get them in front of the NFL scouts and, tell their story and provide that information. But, you're exactly right. I mean, the quarterbacks alone that you mentioned can really dictate some draft stock here. And we've seen some quarterbacks really take advantage of Senior Bowl week. So I agree with you, Russ. I still think anything is 50-50.
Yeah,
Because
and it's a shame because, I mean, we've all been doing this forever, going to Mobile. It's a chance to not only see the best players, but to also see a lot of guys like the Ben Barch kid last year. See these small school kids. How do they do when they're no longer the big fish in a tiny pond? How do they do when they get thrown in with the big boys? Some guys, you can tell within a day it's over. You can tell that they can't handle the jumping competition, and they can't handle it mentally when they don't do well. Or like years back when you saw Laurent Duvernay-Tardif show up to the East-West Shrine game, and after the first 3 snaps of getting his butt kicked, he dominated the whole rest of the week. So you knew right then and there, this guy's going to play in the NFL. He's never going to see the light of day in the CFL. So these games are hugely important. So I think all of us want to see every game take place. I just think it's hard to look at it and say, hey, games are getting canceled all the time. All these events, the NFLPA, the East-West Shrine, to expect that the Senior Bowl in mid-January is going to be able to pull this off, I think it's going to be tough. And I'm hoping it is going to happen, but I just have a hard time seeing it get done.
And we're not going to get our Italian meal in over there.
I know. Or go to Dreamland for my banana pudding.
Well, hey, we have our fingers crossed. We're rooting for the Senior Bowl to pull it off. I hope they do. Any final takes here on the All-Star Game, Buzz, John, Senior Bowl, anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other one is the guys that opted out that you're now seeing getting invited there. That would be another huge loss for them. You know, Jamie Newman's one thing because you're going to get, heavily evaluated as a quarterback. So you need every one of those opportunities. But these other guys, not every one of them is a perfect prospect, in the sense of, Kari Vincent, the corner from LSU, his thing is all about his speed. You're going to be undersized. You go in there and show that you can cover outside, and as a nickel guy, now you get yourself get everybody kind of ready for you at the combine. Now go run a 4.3, and suddenly you can kind of reinstate yourself into the mix. And then it's always, there's someone there, right? There's always somebody in the mix at the Senior Bowl that either comes from another game because somebody drops out and makes a name for themselves, or has a helmet that you haven't always kind of remember where they're from. And you'd want to see a North Carolina Central kid cover a kid from Alabama, right? You want to see the North Dakota State kid or a guy from UNI, going one-on-one against the pass rusher from the SEC or the ACC, things like that. And those small school pass rushers going against a Notre Dame tackle, going against a Georgia guard, things like that. If you don't get that part of it, the game is the game, right? And there's a lot of mystique, and there's a lot of, kind of history and tradition of why they would want to play the game part of it. But really, anybody can tell you, from Sunday afternoon or Monday morning now when they're walking through and you're able to start body typing and seeing personalities and seeing how guys interact with each other and, in an element like that, until about, Wednesday afternoon's practice, there's a lot of money to be made and lost in that period of time. And there's a lot of information that's gathered to then gain or lose momentum headed toward the combine. So I think that's why you can tell why, with everything else being questionable now, why a game like this will try to do everything they can. And it would not be surprising to hear them come out and say they've partnered with a 15-minute or 24-hour testing type group, right? It add something to the mix that we're going to look at and say, okay, now that makes sense. They're going to ask you questions. If they're going to allow people to go, you're probably going to have to explain where you are, what you're doing. Are you quarantining? So it'll be interesting to see how much they can kind of, remedy the situations, but then how much coverage will they be allowed to do with it if you actually hold the event? Because then how many other people are you going to be allowed to have in town?
Tell you one thing, here's a question, could they make some money if they partnered with one of these medical facilities to do the testing? Could they get some sponsorship, get them out there doing the testing, have it be like an outdoor event? Have it be the players get tested, the company gets publicity, a whole day doing that. All of a sudden, this company, where it may cost $50 grand for all the testing. The company may do it for free to get all that national publicity if they're a national company.
Well, we know one product that they could use, right, John?
No doubt.
The safety mask. We're going to talk more about that as the week goes on, along with the Hub football event. This has been another edition of the State of Football, weekdays 9 a.m. Eastern, your new home for real football talk in the mornings. Of course, we told you DeMarcus Ware, Von Miller, Myles Garrett. You want to learn what makes them so special? You want to break it down like Baldy? Join us inside the film room Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern. You can log on, sign up at NFLDraftBible.com. Of course, we've got Friday Night Scout School. Russell has got the football GM and scouting course. We got the NFL Draft Bible Virtual Edition available now. If you sign up and become a disciple, Familia 50 is the promo discount. You will unlock the magic. You'll gain access to our new premium insider website content that's coming. Of course, endless rankings, scouting reports, background, medicals. Hey, I just got back from San Diego. Teams telling me our stuff is really the only website they reference, right? And so if it's good enough for the teams, it should be good enough for you. Again, it's because of the folks like you that support the cause and contribute to an independent scouting platform that enables us, as John just mentioned, to provide intel and information and questionnaires and the 100 seniors that we've already interviewed and, content for days. I mean, I've got more content on my laptop than probably half the organizations in the NFL, right? It's just the way we do it here. I'm not trying to brag. I'm not trying to boast. When you talk about being on location at all these all-star games or free agent workouts, I went to 5 camps this summer at A&C. I just got back from the Hub. John was at both Hub football camps. I've seen more street free agents and gone to more all-star games. The NFL Draft Bible only media outlet on location at all the all-star games. The only one. So when you talk about credibility, okay, and I love Mel Kiper and Todd McShay and hey, hats off to you, but let's be honest. I mean, Mel Kiper just went to the combine for the first time last year. Give me a break. You're not seeing him in the press box or down on the field scouting before a game. We are. That's what we do. We're talking to the coaches. We're talking to the cafeteria workers. We're talking to the parents. I'm pregame and tailgating in the parking lot, getting to know, the whole story. Okay. And so that's what people don't realize is that you're not just investing in talent. That's a good part of it. You're investing in the person. And who knows the people better than we do at the NFL Draft Bible? Nobody, because we're talking to the parents. We're talking to the coaches. We're talking to the players for years and years and years. I was going to Temple when no scouts would go to Temple. Now there's 20 scouts there every year, and they remember that. And so, a big thing of what we do at the NFL Draft Bible, I'm not going to sit here and claim I'm the best evaluator, but our draft guide is the most accurate. You know why? Because a big part of scouting is knowing who to listen to. And if you got that, well, then, hey, you've got a big battle won. And again, our rankings, I'll put them up there with any team board, with any third-party media outlet, because we might be a round or two off, but you couldn't have a crystal ball like Nostradamus and predict the way these guys came off the board like we did. I'm reading the chat room here, but hey, listen, I got to tell you guys this because nobody else is going to do it if I don't. And so we've been doing this now. This is our 19th draft season. And again, we can't do it without you guys, all your love and support and your subscribing to us and being able to do this show every day. And the guys behind the scenes that make it all happen, they know who they are. Ryan Roberts and Dakota Follett, another one of Russ's students now doing stuff for us here at the Draft Bible. Drew Schweitzer, of course. And so Samantha behind the scenes producing the show. We're family run. I mean, what's better than that? My wife is doing all the business and admin and this is what we do. So there's a glimpse into the NFL Draft Bible familia. So that's my parting shot for today. We go over to Russ Lande for a final take here. Russ, what do you got for us?
Firstly, I just want to say I've been doing this for what seems like ages. And I only met Rick a little over 2 years ago. but he is not BSing. There are very few people in this business that grind like Rick does. If you look at people in the media, you don't see it. There are definitely some reporters and stuff who bust their butt and do a phenomenal job, like Jay Glazer, who work hard at their craft and are nonstop effort. But in terms of draft coverage, there is nobody grinding like Rick. There is nobody out there doing all the little things.
Thank you, Russ.
And I've gotten to know a lot of these guys over the years, and I'm not knocking them, saying they're bad, but it's the grind. It's being a scout in football is a bear. Finding guys all over the country is a bear. And when you're doing it in the media, you don't have the staff that NFL teams do and the resources. And what Rick does is pretty amazing. In terms of my parting shot, we talked a lot about the Senior Bowl and whether it'll happen, whether it won't. All I can tell you is, to me, it would be such a shame if it didn't happen this year. I know how hard Jim works, how hard that entire group of people there is working right now to make sure they can pull this off. It's not only a valuable thing for NFL teams, but it really is part of the fabric of the NFL. It's really become sort of an institution, and there's a lot of things that go on there outside of scouting football. I think it allows people to maintain relationships that sometimes get strained by the travel of the business. It allows people that are unknown to get introduced to some higher ups and move up the charts and hopefully get opportunities career-wise. So I really hope they're able to pull it off. There's no, to me, better week in football than the week in Mobile, going down there. And for all of us people that don't live in the same cities, getting to Mobile, you get to see a lot of your friends that you relate to online. But because of your jobs and where you're working, you don't see them. Mobile is a great place, and I really hope that the Senior Bowl can pull this off this year.
Yeah, I hope so. And, we're keeping our fingers crossed. They are doing as good of a job as you possibly can there. So shout out to the Senior Bowl staff. And thank you, Russ, for those words. I appreciate that. Greatly appreciative. John Murphy with the parting shot.
Yeah, so I guess the check is in the mail for us now after that.
I Venmo'd him right before.
Yeah. Hopefully, Russ, if you're not busy on Fridays, you can come on, because now even you'll get better games than I get. Big Law will have the Ohio State, Indiana. I'll have Florida against Vanderbilt, unless you show up, in which case I'll get Mercer against Eastern Kentucky.
As you rightfully should.
Thanks for that. Right. But, hey, we mentioned it, the biggest thing that could be lost by not having these events are the relationships, right? And it's the relationships at every level. There's two kids that could end up being roommates, meeting for the first time in the room at the Senior Bowl with a dream of playing in the NFL, who one day could be teammates, could one day end up being in their weddings together, could one day, end up on the field playing against each other. But all of it starts, at these events, right? I mean, hell,
that John's roommate, whenever he goes to Mobile, knows how to hook up internet.
That too.
See John.
Right. I got to be good for something, so I can at least get him either a free meal in Mobile, or send him in the wrong direction from wherever I'm going. So, but that's how these relationships work, right? I owe it to our friend Matt, who met me and had been friends and worked with Russ, and said, hey, you know what? You two guys live near each other. You guys should get together and meet.
And you wonder why I don't talk to Matt anymore.
Yeah, and that's why he completely went underground and is never seen from again. Is he's like, man, nobody should do that to their best friend. And the same thing we mentioned. It's going to be 20 years ago, I think, this year. That Rick and I are the only two idiots that are at the actual draft. It doesn't start till 11 o'clock, and we're there at 7 a.m. Trying to get settled and get set up and things like that. So to me, there's a lot of relationships that are born and bred at a lot of these events. And you're mentioning it, the scouts, you hear somebody got sick, or you hear somebody's retiring, or unfortunately, sometimes that's how we hear, or see somebody that's lost a job and, kind of needs that event to kind of motivate them to get back, get back into the swing of things. So to me, that's the biggest part of wanting to get some more normality back, to the industry, is that this is one industry that has suffered as much as any other industry on all sides, right? We've heard there's been hundreds, if not thousands, of layoffs, whether it's ESPN, the NFL Network. We know the teams are suffering in all levels of football, right? There's no more, indoor, arena football played for an entire calendar year. That's not only players, that's coaches, that's staff, that's people that work behind the scenes. the same thing. The large majority of the CFL are in, kind of that struggle mode, heading toward 2021. But if you want something interesting, and we know we've announced what these bowl games are going to do this week, if you go to www.greycupunite.ca, CFL is doing a week-long worth of events, some of them team-related, a lot of them league-related, some historical ideas, some fun things that they're doing, trying to figure out, like, who is your individual best Grey Cup team of all time, which would be similar to saying, like, who's the best 49er or a Cowboys Super Bowl winning team, and they have their own kind of events going on with it. And then come Saturday, even though we all finished 0-0, so we either all finished in first or we all finished in last, whichever way you want to look at it, for the first time ever, the CFL will decide next year's draft rankings in terms of who's going to have the number one pick will be decided by a lottery system. So either alphabetically, or geographically, or by bingo ball process. And let's hope we're like the Knicks with Patrick Ewing. Just give it to Toronto. We need it. You'll find out Friday, during a great event that they have scheduled, what the process for this year's 2021 CFL draft will be. So I think that's something we all have to do, right? We all want this to be the way we're doing it and get back to kind of the normal way of doing things. But we also have to be ready to think outside the box. And like we've mentioned, this is just Rick and I having a BS conversation one day saying, hey, you know what? I got nothing to do. You're not doing anything. These calls and these conversations we're having on the phone, what if we just went live with them and see what happens? Right. And here we are, 80 episodes later, with it. So I think it's a fun time to be doing this business. We're thinking outside the box and still bringing you, the same type of information. And, we mentioned it, the number one thing that those guys are on top of that worked and did the hub. And again, it's not taking shots at anybody else at what they're doing, because it's a necessary thing that the guys went down and got 3 to 4 weeks of game film at the spring league. That's going to help guys get jobs, not just the players. Coach Glanville's down there grinding his ass off at 70 whatever years old, coaching his team on an everyday basis to help get those kids an opportunity. So it's not just the players that will get an opportunity from the spring league and things like the hub football. But the number one thing the hub football has been able to do is 120 plus players, 20 plus staff members, guys coming from all over the place, and they've been able to COVID secure and be safe with everything they're doing by tracking ahead of time, making sure the guys, are protected at the event, going through all the testing, the day of, and making sure that the guys, are able to then be presentable to the NFL and other leagues once they start up. So I think, we're on the right track, with things. We got to hope that, they can find us, something, that either we can take and go back to doing business as normal, or hope by time we get, to January that there's a little more bright light on the other side of this calendar to see how we can get back to doing business. And like I said, if you're listening, CFL, just give us a little bigger bingo ball on Saturday. We kind of still need the help. Russ has enough quality Canadians out there. He doesn't need any more.
Yeah, we got to get your boy Jerry a can't stop, won't stop shirt for real, man. Like,
he's 78. He ain't ever going to stop.
Hey, Russ, 78 years old, but 38 minutes or so after playing his first game, he was sending me an email going, all right, I need some more big bastards. Who do you know that might show up down here? So, and that's what we're talking about, right? That's a lifer, right? You want to talk about, that's a guy that he puts his heart and soul, into everything he's doing. Do you really think Jerry Glanville needs to be in San Antonio, Texas right now, coaching these guys?
With the COVID.
Kind of, right. But putting that kind of effort, right, where you're the head coach of that team. And again, it's not about the person's name, because the personality, when you hear Jerry Glanville, and then the person, when you meet him, you can't get two different kind of things more than that guy, right? The personality is bigger than life, but at the end of the day, the heart and soul that guy puts into his players is very, very rare, right? And he's calling and he's emailing and he's texting about his guys down at the spring league, just like he was when he had Deion Sanders or Brian, It's the same effort and the same momentum. He's like, I want to see these kids, be successful. And you wonder why those guys, when he was in Hamilton or anywhere else he's been, why they run through a wall for him. It's because he does the little things like that to ensure their success, not just his own.
Very well said. With that being said, we are going to wrap this up, and we are going to put a ribbon on it. So we appreciate everybody tuning in for today's episode. This was part 77. We'll be back at it again tomorrow with part 78 edition, and we do bring you the best guests in the business each and every Tuesday. Russ Lande joins us for the college football / NFL draft rodeo show. I forget who we have for tomorrow's show. Thursday, we'll have Dane Vandernat and Neil Stratton. Friday, of course, Big Law. And then Saturday, the Tailgate Show, which Russ every now and then hops on board and joins us for that one as well. So, hey, make sure you log on NFLDraftBible.com for all the can't stop, won't stop coverage. We're banging you, bopping you over the head, blessing you with all our NFL draft coverage. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody.